Welcome to The Bitter Witness.
Don't be scared.
Hello, welcome back. I hope you've had a good week. I've had a busy week, as usual. I'm Rebecca, and I'm your bitter witness. As many of you know, I am a theater nut, and I am currently in the production of The Mousetrap by Dame Agatha Christie. I'm playing Mrs. Boyle, the absolute horrible bitch, and this is a bucket list role for me. I love Mrs. Boyle so much, and really, according to those who know me well, it's not a huge stretch for me to play her. Anyway, we open next week, so rehearsals are getting intense, and the last finishing touches are being put on costumes and hair and makeup. It's all the best parts of the theater, and I love every minute of it. So, how about a Marv and Marge update? Well, I'm happy to inform you that I haven't actually seen either of them in a couple of days. I'm hoping that they have both been run over by the train that goes past my backyard, but I'm sure I'm not that lucky. I saw them earlier in the week running around on the shelves in the back room. I was watching them for a couple of minutes when Marv stopped and looked at me. I'm pretty sure I saw him mouth the words, "fuck you," and then he ran off like the little spazzy fucker he is. Someone asked about the back room. I need to explain this because I don't want people thinking that I actually have squirrels inside my home. This room was added on to my house by the previous owners, and let's just say that whoever owned this house before me really thought they were a damn good handyman, but they weren't. So this back room currently has a huge branch that fell through the roof, and there's no heat, no hydro, and we don't use it. And I would love nothing more than to tear it off and build a deck, but thanks to COVID, wood prices have gone sky fucking high. So for now, I'm letting Marv and Marge habitate there. 'Cause I'm not going near those two spazoids. Squirrels are fucking crazy, man. They'll kill you. If you enjoy the show, please head over to our Patreon page and show us some support. For a few cents a day, you can get exclusive access to the Bitter Bits, just smaller episodes, talking about things that I find interesting in the cases, or even other cases that maybe are too short to make a full episode about. As well, if you're listening on Apple, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps the show. Well, the dogs are sleeping behind me, so Puppy ASMR will be brought to you by both Miley and Piper this week. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, relax, while I tell you the case of the kidnapping and murder of Katie Poirer. As always, I want to give the victims in the case top billing, so Katie, and to the other victims that we don't know about, I acknowledge you, and I send my love to you wherever you may be. Trigger warning for this episode. This episode includes sexual assault, rape, kidnapping, and murder. Last week, we discussed the murder of 12-year-old Callie Jo Larson. An absolute horrific murder and senseless. And during that case, I told you about another case that had a suspect who was considered a potential perpetrator of Callie Jo's murder. That of the kidnapping and murder of 19-year-old Katie Poirer. I only briefly touched on Katie's case last week, and I thought it fitting that I tell you the entire story this week. This week, we will be discussing an absolute vile shit snake named Donald Bloom, who was one of the most notoriously convicted murderers from Minnesota. The kidnapping and murder of Katie Poirer absolutely rocked the community of Moose Lake, as well as most of the state of Minnesota. But first, let's learn a little bit about Katie. At the time of Katie's kidnapping and murder, she was 19 years old and working at a convenience store. She was energetic, loved all sports and animals. She wanted to be either a police officer or a game warden. She was loved by everyone who knew her. She was engaged and excited about starting her life with her fiancé, Matthew. Katie was an absolute beautiful soul. On May 26, 1999, a customer walked into DJ's Expressway convenience store, located just on the outskirts of Moose Lake, Minnesota, very near the interstate. He noticed that the store was open, but there were no employees inside the store. He called police and reported it. When police arrived, there was no sign that anything violent had happened inside the store, and no money had been taken. The store was just empty. In fact, there was a pile of money and notes on the counter. This was all from customers who had come in and bought something during the time when there was no employee working at the store. They probably thought that the employee was in the washroom or taking the garbage out or something like that. And this just goes to show you the type of people who lived in Moose Lake. Perhaps a little naive, but at the root, good, honest people. The police found Katie's car keys and her sunglasses sitting on the ledge of the window behind the till. They thought that perhaps Katie had left the store with friends. In an interview, one of the detectives stated that the police wondered if one of her friends had come and taken Katie as a prank or maybe for something else like a party. First of all, Katie's car was in the parking lot and she was 19, not 12. I have to say, when I saw this detective in the interview say this, I was like, really? You're a detective and that's the first place your mind went? A prank? Dumbass. Katie's father stated that he never for 1 second thought that Katie had left the store willingly. Her car was still there and she would never have done that. Katie was a responsible young girl. She would have called her boss if she was sick and had to go home. And she wouldn't have just walked away with the store open like that. She would have locked it up. This mindset that this detective had is just one of the reasons why we have so many unsolved crimes today. It always amazes me that the group of people that have been trained to look for crimes always seem to be the ones who are the first to dismiss the possibility of a crime happening. Just frustrating. Always go to a crime first, and if you find it and it's not a crime, then that's great. But the other way, if you flip that, thinking it's not a crime and a crime actually happened, it's harder to go back and figure out what happened. There were 4 security cameras inside the store. One of the cameras was pointed towards the till area. At 11:38 p.m. on the videotape, you can see a man with his hands on the back of Katie's neck, pushing her out the front door of the store. But the images on the cameras are so grainy, it's impossible to make out the faces of either Katie or the asshole who took her. I said this last week, and I went on a huge rant about it, and I'm going to say it again because it's fucking important. Business owners, buy decent cameras for your stores. They're not that expensive now. It drives me fucking insane when I see these grainy images of a crime happening. If someone is going to commit a crime like this, they're brazen. This shit stain didn't care if anyone saw him taking Katie, and he didn't care that there were cameras inside the store. He was probably banking on the cameras being shit. And of course, there were no cameras outside the store, so no chance of finding a getaway car. For fuck's sakes, put them on the outside too. Technology, even back in 1999 when this happened, could have cleaned up some of these grainy images, at least enough to get a plate. And some person somewhere would have been able to at least identify what kind of vehicle she was put into. Patterson can almost 100% of the time tell what kind of car is coming towards us as we're driving, just by looking at the headlights of a car. So someone would have been able to identify the make and model of the car that she was in. A person's life, Katie's life, was worth more than what you fucking saved by being a cheap bastard and buying shitty cameras. All right, rant done for now. The DJ's Expressway convenience was located almost next to Interstate 35, so there was a good chance that whoever took Katie had hopped onto the freeway and was hundreds of miles away by the time the police figured out what had happened. And with no cameras outside the store, no APB on a potential getaway car could be put out. But in the days that followed Katie's disappearance, hundreds of thousands of people came out to search for her. They were all desperately hoping to find her alive. Moose Lake and the surrounding areas were thoroughly searched looking for her, but unfortunately, there was no sign of Katie. People who lived near the store told police that they had seen a black pickup truck circling the area around the time of Katie's abduction. Okay, I have to stop. If you see a vehicle of any kind driving around in circles in your neighborhood, call the fucking police and report a suspicious vehicle. Really, what's the worst that's going to happen? If it's someone looking for an address and the police show up, the police will tell them where the address is. If not, you've just made it so that an asshole who is about to commit a crime knows that the police are aware of him. If someone had called about this black truck circling the neighborhood, there's a big chance that Katie might still be here today. An employee who worked at the subway, which was connected to the convenience store, told police that they had seen the same black truck in the parking lot around 10 o'clock before Katie was taken. The employee told police that the man inside the black pickup truck was looking at females that were leaving the two stores really in a creepy way. The subway employee finished her shift for the night and started driving home. Coincidentally, she happened to be driving along the road behind the creepy guy in the black truck. When police interviewed the employee from the subway, she said that the truck had a Minnesota plate and the first 3 digits were 557, and the employee remembered that the last letter on the plate was a Y. She told the police that the truck was swerving on the road and eventually pulled into a cafe in Moose Lake. Finally, someone who follows their gut. This girl deserves a fucking medal. She knew this asshat was creepy, and she did what she could in the moment to follow her gut and make note of the license plate. Let me tell you something. It is way, way, way easier for police to find a vehicle than it is to find a person. If something is happening around you or you see something creepy or your gut is telling you it doesn't feel right, look at the plate and make a mental note or write it down. Hell, take a stone and scratch it onto the pavement. The stone will act like chalk, and at least the plate number will be somewhere that you can give it to the police later. Police began searching the Minnesota database for black pickup trucks with the license plate starting 557 and ending in the letter Y. And almost unbelievably, there were hundreds of black pickup trucks with those same numbers at the beginning and Y at the end. That's unreal. What are the chances of that happening? Now, I talked a little bit about the videotapes, and these videos were just awful. But the police sent the videotapes to NASA and asked them to see if they could clean up the images of the man that took Katie. Solar astrophysicist Dr. David Hathaway created a process to enhance video images called VISAR, VISAR. That is Video Image Stabilization and Registration. I am not an astrophysicist, but I'm going to explain what this process does as best as I can. It stabilizes the video images so that you can add images together. And when you do that, you reduce a lot of the noise that you see when you look at a still frame of the video. So a video picture is 2 different fields that create one picture. The 2 fields change so fast that the human eye cannot decipher between the 2. Hathaway combined the even and odd frames from the video of Katie's kidnapping so that both could be viewed at the same time. And by combining the 2 sets of frames, it created twice the number of lines of resolution in the images. Hathaway was able to isolate a video still of the kidnapper. Even by using VISAR, he wasn't able to get a clear picture of the kidnapper's face, but he was able to see clearly that the kidnapper had short blonde hair, was about 5'10", with an average build, and he was wearing a dark New York Yankees baseball jersey with the number 23 on the back. With what the police had gotten from NASA, a police sketch artist made up a rough sketch of the kidnapper, and police included pictures of the jersey that he was wearing when he took Katie. They released the sketch and the clothing description to the media. Hundreds of tips came in from the sketch. There is a dog hair on my microphone and it's hitting my face. I think that's a Piper hair. I think I got it. 3 weeks after Katie was taken, a call came in. This call was number 1960. The caller worked at the Minnesota Veterans Home in Minneapolis. They reported that there was a janitor who had just abruptly quit, and the caller thought that the janitor might be the kidnapper. The caller identified Donald Bloom. The caller said that about 3 weeks prior, Bloom had drastically changed his appearance by shaving off all of his facial hair and cutting and dyeing his hair. As well, the caller said that he had seen Bloom wear the Yankees jersey on several occasions at work, and that about 3 weeks, the time that Katie was kidnapped, Bloom stopped driving his black pickup truck and started driving a Suburban to work. Bloom was a convicted sex offender. He had been convicted in 1975 when he kidnapped and raped a 14-year-old girl and locked her in the trunk of his car. Thankfully, the girl was able to escape. She went to police and they were able to catch and convict him. Then, in 1978, only 3 years later, he was convicted again of aggravated assault. In 1983, he was convicted of criminal sexual conduct. And then again, in 1983, he kidnapped 2 young girls and forced them to enter a wooded area by knife point and tied them to a tree. Thankfully, the 2 girls were able to escape before Bloom had a chance to assault them, or worse. What the hell, Minnesota? Why is this guy in 1975 raping a girl, being convicted, and then 3 years later he's convicted again of something else? 5 years after that, he does it again and then kidnaps in the same year. Why in 1983 was he not put in jail for the criminal sexual conduct? If he was in jail, he would never have attacked those 2 girls and tied them to a tree. You guys got to do better. Donald Bloom was 50 years old at the time of Katie's kidnapping. He was married and had 4 children. Police started looking into Bloom. I think that's how you say his name. It's Blom. And honestly, I really don't care if I'm saying it right because he's a shit pig. So police started looking into Bloom and they hit a jackpot. He had prior arrests all the way back to the 70s for assault, rape, and kidnapping. When the police searched the DMV databases, there was no indication that Bloom owned a black pickup truck. The database said he actually owned a white pickup truck. But nevertheless, police executed a search warrant at the home of Bloom, but there was no trace of Katie there. Bloom said he was completely innocent and had an alibi for the night of Katie's kidnapping. But then police found out that Bloom owned a piece of property near Caring, Minnesota, which is kind of close to Moose Lake and about 10 miles from the store where Katie was working. A search was conducted of that property as well, but they weren't able to find any trace of Katie. Then the police noticed a fire pit that was next to Bloom's trailer on the property. They had forensics sift through the fire pit, and in the pit, they found several items that looked like small pieces of bone. Police sent the pieces to a forensic anthropologist to examine the fragments. There were some pieces of bone found in the pit that were so small, the anthropologist couldn't even determine if they were animal or human. But there was human bone in that pile of pieces. The rest of the pile was animal bone. And the anthropologist was able to determine that the fragments of bone found in Bloom's fire pit were from a female between the ages of 17 and 24. However, the bones were too badly burned to conduct any DNA testing, and overall, the pieces that the police had found was really only about 25% of an entire human skeleton. But there was tooth fragments in that pile of bone pieces. So they sent those tooth fragments to a forensic odontologist. The odontologist was able to determine that the biggest tooth fragment was consistent with one of Katie's molars, and in that molar there was a small indentation which looked like a filling. And it looked like there was some of the filling left in the tooth. It was charred, but there was still a little bit of remnants in there. They conducted an analysis on the remnants of the filling, and it was determined that the filling contained zirconium and silicon. The scientists told the police that this was a really unusual mixture, and they had never seen fillings made of these materials before. The police contacted Katie's dentist, who told the police that she had actually replaced one of Katie's fillings 2 weeks before the kidnapping, and that she had used a brand new dental cement that wasn't even on the market yet. It was a sample that had been given to the dentist at a conference to try out and see if she liked using it. Police contacted 3M, the company that made the sample of dental cement, and they confirmed that the dental cement in the sample was made up of the same two elements and the same concentration of those elements that the scientists found in the filling from the fire pit on Bloom's property. As far as prosecutors were concerned, this meant that it was Katie's tooth that was in the fire pit. Katie had been found, but not the way anyone wanted to find her. Inside a garage on Bloom's property, they found a black pickup truck. The truck had Minnesota license plates 557HDY. Police arrested and charged Bloom with Katie Poirier's kidnapping and murder. And in the police video inside the interrogation room, this absolute piece of garbage is actually wearing the Yankee jersey that he was wearing when he kidnapped Katie. And in the video, he walks into the interrogation room and walks straight at the camera, staring into the camera. He is an absolute asswipe. I just wanted to punch his face. Shocker, Bloom denied any involvement in Katie's kidnapping. He told the police that he had been at his property near Moose Lake on May 14th or 15th, and then again on June 12th. Bloom said that on May 26th, he left work early and went fishing on the Kettle River, a mile or two south of Sandstone, Minnesota, but he claimed he was home in Richfield, Minnesota by 10 p.m. On June 20th, the police arrested Bloom. They put Bloom in a police lineup, and the employee from the Subway shop positively identified Bloom as the man in the black pickup truck that was sitting outside both the Subway and DJ's convenience store that night. On June 23rd, Bloom was charged with kidnapping. His bail was set at $285,000. Why was this shitfuck given bail? With all those prior convictions, Bloom started sending notes to the sheriff and said that he wanted to meet with him. Now, this is about August-ish time after he'd been arrested. And the sheriff thought that Bloom wanted to confess to Katie's murder. He set up a meeting with Bloom and Bloom's lawyers. Of course, at the meeting, Bloom's lawyers said, "Don't say anything." But Bloom told his lawyers, "I want to accept an offer because I'm tired of this." But even with Bloom saying that, the meeting ended and he didn't make any statement to the sheriff at all. But then on September 3rd, Bloom agreed to meet with a television reporter. And according to the reporter's broadcast on September 7th, Bloom met with the reporter for about 30 minutes, during which time the reporter took 6 pages of notes. The reporter stated during the interview, Bloom made it clear he wasn't ready to share with me the whole story regarding Katie, but promised that if I came back on Monday, he'd tell me what everybody wants to hear. And then the reporter asked him if the tooth found in his fire pit belonged to Katie. And his answer was, it could be. What a fucking vile piece of puke this asshole is. But Bloom never met with that reporter on the Monday, and Bloom never told that reporter anything. And that same reporter met with Bloom over the years, hoping that at some point Bloom might admit to killing Katie, but that never happened. On September 7th, letters were sent from the prosecutors to Bloom's attorney offering a plea deal, which just burns my ass, but I understand why they're doing it, because they're trying to find Katie's body. In the plea agreement that the prosecutors sent to Bloom, he had to give a complete and detailed statement regarding the abduction and murder of Katie. And he had to plead guilty to all charges, both state and federal. He was facing a whole bunch of charges. On September 8th, Bloom gave a statement to the prosecutors regarding his involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Katie Poirer. In his statement, Bloom admitted to kidnapping Katie and forcing her to leave the convenience store. He stated that he pushed her into his truck. He stated that he drove Katie to his property near Carrick and walked her down to the trailer and stood her in front of the fire pit and strangled her from behind until she was dead. He said he then threw Katie's body into the fire pit and burned Katie's body using fence boards, but did not use an accelerant, which is absolute bullshit, and I don't believe him at all. He's lying. Wood starts to chemically break down at 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the properties of wood become vapors. And those vapors contain about 50 to 60% of the heat value of wood. At 1100 degrees, these vapors will burn off. To reduce a body to ash, you have to maintain a temperature between 1400 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. They only found a few of Katie's bones in that fire pit, and usually when cremation occurs, the remains that are left behind weigh between 5 and 8 pounds. And there was not 8 pounds of remains in that fire pit. And there was also animal bones mixed in with Katie's bones. Bloom was not telling the truth. He had to use some kind of accelerant to reduce Katie's body down to those little pieces of bone that were found. Bloom stated to the prosecutors that the bones they recovered from his fire pit did in fact belong to Katie Poirer. He stated that he did not sexually assault Poirer, but that he may have been thinking about it. What an absolute piece of fucking shit. I hate this guy. He's so cocky and arrogant. As a part of the plea agreement, Bloom wanted to be jailed in either North or South Dakota, and they gave it to him. So for the time being, he was sent to North Dakota to a prison. Oh my God, buckle in, kids, because, this is going to send you over the edge. Bloom's lawyers told the media that Bloom made his statement about his involvement in Katie's kidnapping and murder, quote, out of his feelings for the Poirer family and certainly out of the feelings for his own family, unquote. And that Bloom, quote, wanted to get the matter behind him, unquote. You know what? Get right fucked, Bloom. You don't get to act like you're doing a favor for Katie's family. You absolute piece of shit trash. Oh, this guy just infuriates me. When prosecutors cross-examined Bloom about his confession, he would only give yes or no answers. And he stated that he had never seen the baseball jersey before, that his coworkers claimed to have seen him wear it, and that they must have been mistaken. On September 16th, a grand jury indicted Bloom for first-degree murder. Inside the evidence that was presented to the grand jury was Bloom's statement from September 8th, talking about his involvement in Katie Poirer's murder. And at this point, this piece of shit told the court that he was uncomfortable entering the guilty plea until there had been DNA testing on the bones that were found on his property. He recanted his confession. But DNA testing at this time could take months to complete. And because of the state of Katie's remains, DNA testing might not come back with any conclusive results at all. And that wasn't part of the plea agreement. As well, prosecutors stated that they felt Bloom's version of burning Katie's body was impossible. I told you so. The judge told Bloom's lawyers to speak with Bloom and ensure that his account was truthful. The next day in court, prosecutors withdrew their offer for the plea deal because he refused to plead guilty, which was part of the plea agreement. You know I don't like getting into a lot of the court case, but I've read the transcripts of this court case, and this was a shit show from the beginning. It was chaos. The defense counsel, that's Bloom's lawyers, filed a motion to have the judge removed, stating on the grounds of interest and bias. They were saying that the judge was biased against Bloom. Are you kidding me? The judge denied the motion, and then that judge that they tried to get rid of fired the defense counsel from Bloom's case and brought in a different defense counsel. And then the chief judge removed that judge and put a replacement judge in. It's insanity. It's just ridiculous. It's more of a circus than what the O.J. Simpson trial was. The prosecutors gave Bloom until a certain date at the end of September to accept the plea agreement, and then it would be off the table forever. And the judge asked him if he understood what the plea agreement was stating that he had to do. This was Bloom's answer. I don't want much from the agreement other than for my family to be left alone. That was his answer. Do you understand the plea agreement? I don't want much. I just want my family to be left alone. Like, this guy is playing a fucking game. He told the judge that his family was not being left alone and that discovery documents had been given to the media. His trailer had burnt down and his wife was receiving threatening phone calls and he was being threatened at night. You know what? You're being threatened at night because you kidnapped and murdered a beautiful young girl for absolutely no fucking reason. She was 19. She was a fucking baby. I wish we had gotten some jailhouse justice on you because you fucking deserved it. So kudos to the inmates that were threatening him. What ended up happening was that the prosecutors dropped the kidnapping charge and went ahead only with the first-degree murder charge. And he was convicted and found guilty and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. But he was jailed in Minnesota, not in North Dakota, so they didn't honor anything that he wanted. Bloom, of course, appealed his conviction, and this time his wife sent a letter to the prosecutors stating that she felt that Bloom had murdered Katie and that Bloom was an abusive husband and that Bloom had adopted her surname to hide the fact that he had prior convictions. His wife also told them that she believed he had murdered and raped other women, but she didn't have any knowledge of what those were because Bloom kept her in the dark. She also told the prosecutors in this letter that he was not at home the night that Katie was kidnapped. Bloom's sons, which I don't know if they're from her or from another wife, but they confirmed the abuse and backed up that he wasn't home the night of Katie's kidnapping. In 2004, an appeals court upheld Bloom's conviction, and in 2006, Bloom expressed his willingness to answer questions about unsolved local crimes in an exchange for a transfer to a prison closer to his relatives, and in comes the North Dakota. Detectives, when they arrived with the transfer letter, Bloom talked about other matters for 3 days, and he never confessed anything. So he was just fucking toying with people. He's a piece of shit. In 2007, Minnesota's Supreme Court rejected Bloom's third petition for a new hearing. On January 10th, 2023, Bloom died at the age of 73 in Oak Park Heights Prison in Minnesota. Rot in hell, you absolute shitfuck. Throughout this entire nightmare, Katie's parents powered through all of their pain. In a news conference after the sentencing hearing, Katie's mother stated, "If he was waiting for me to break down or to carry on, he didn't get it." I don't know how she did that because I would have been hysterical. She's a much stronger woman than me. Katie's parents worked hard to create Katie's Law. Katie's Law was signed in April 2000, a year after Katie's murder. Katie's Law increases penalties for failing to register, brings new offenders under the registration law, restricts felons from changing their names, builds a DNA database of known offenders, and requires lifetime registration for violent or predatory sex offenders. It also allows flexibility in the statute of limitations for prosecutors and posting information about level 3 sex offenders on the Department of Corrections website. Something good came out of this horrible tragedy. Bloom was an absolute waste of skin. He has been linked to a number of other sexual assaults and murders, but sadly, we may never know how many victims he actually had. Bloom took that truth with him, just like a coward would. This shit bitch wouldn't even confess to kidnapping and killing Katie when he died. My thoughts. This was a completely avoidable crime. First off, why was there only one employee working in the convenience store? I read in an article that the company that owned the convenience store has now made it mandatory that there's always 2 people working on a night shift. But they had to wait until Katie was kidnapped and murdered before they made that rule. There should never have been one employee in a convenience store overnight. That's absolutely ridiculous. And number 2, this man should never have been walking the streets. With all of the convictions that he had, he should have been in prison for the rest of his life before he even got anywhere near that convenience store that night. He was a habitual offender. If he had been kept in jail after the first or second time that he offended, none of these women ever would have been hurt and Katie would still be alive. Law enforcement has to do better. The court system has to do better. There has to be a way to fix it because this kind of crime shouldn't be happening. All we can hope for now is that he is reaping what he sowed while he was alive, wherever he is now. What an absolute piece of garbage this guy was. I actually am having trouble coming up with enough swear words to describe him. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to our Patreon page and show us some love. For a few cents a day, you can get exclusive access to the Bitter Bits, shorter episodes that deal with crime. Sometimes they're talking about other cases that maybe are too short to do a full episode on, or even sometimes I might do an update if one comes along to one of the cases that we've covered. Also, if you're listening on Apple, please give us a 5-star review. It really, really helps the show. You can also subscribe here on Patreon and get the same exclusive access to the Bitter Bits. And with that, I will leave you until next week. Enjoy your day today. This has been a Bitter Witness production.